Hi, welcome back to the series. If you're new here, we've been hard at work on a Chrome extension to enhance YouTube Studio for creators. I've added a couple widgets here. One to check the title to make sure it's not getting super long. Another one where we can add overlays to our thumbnails. But one I have been wanting to add for a while now is to be able to add reusable snippets to my video descriptions. So say I wanted some lorem ipsum text for demo purposes here and some subscribe text. I can quickly add those. YouTube only has this upload defaults, but this goes for every video. Sometimes I want different text for different videos, so I wanted to add these reusable snippets. So what I used to do is just go and find an old video, go to the details, copy whatever text I wanted, go back, and then paste it in. But now with this, I can just quickly, easily add blocks of text from a collection. And soon we'll add a pop-up over here to add and edit these snippets pretty quickly and easily. That'll be the next video. So once again, this one took several days to figure out. Just getting some boilerplate sorted and learning some new libraries and things and how I want to organize stuff and structure things and get things architected here. But we'll run through this real quick. So I started off by refactoring the Chrome runtime stuff to use more Rescript. So we used to have this background.js, so it's just regular plain JavaScript for wiring up ports in Chrome, but I refactored that to use Rescript. So same thing, it's making a map of listeners that we can connect to. Right, it was making a map of listeners that we can connect to. Right, see, we just added a bit to our Chrome module here. That way we know what port we're connecting to by name and adding listeners, and the rest of that you can ignore. Right. And after that, just a little more work to get that refactored over from JavaScript to our Rescript version. Then after that, I added a separate Vite config for the background and service worker stuff, and then refactoring the payload. That way we can send data over these Chrome ports back and forth from the background where our data will live over to our components and widgets on the front end. So we'll have payloads with data and then tags. Let's see. All right, so we'll have payloads of data and then tagging them by what kind of event it might be, which then brings me to Dexy. So I'm using Dexy to store our description snippets in IndexedDB on the background side of things. So I can show you that real quick. We can actually get to it by inspecting our pop-up here. So in IndexedDB, we have this just kind of hello world setup where hello Dexy is our database. Right, so you can see we have our subscribe and our lorem ipsum generator, just like we have in our pop-up, or just like we have in our modal here. So we're loading them from our background, our service worker, sending them across a port to our content to pass to our widget here whenever it connects. So that'll make more sense when I run through it in a little bit. And so I'm using Rescript Dexy bindings for that. And getting started, I just added a simple description schema here with simple shape. This kind of evolves, so you'll see that. And then we added a table for our descriptions. And so after we got our Chrome runtime set up, it can get data from the background and receive it over a port. Right, so in this case, payload will be the data. So yeah, running through this kind of high level, right, we got the Chrome runtime boilerplate set up so we can pass messages back and forth from the background, sending data to the content to pass to our widgets. Got IndexedDB set up so we can have somewhere to store our data. And then I had to upgrade to Rescript version 11 so that we could add MUI. That way I can take full advantage of Material UI. Once again, YouTube Studio is a Google product, Material UI is a Google product, so they will look and function well together. and feel much more cohesive. So now that I upgraded to Rescript version 11, we can use Rescript bindings for Material UI and take full advantage of that and not have to use my own custom bindings anymore, which is really nice. So now we're going to add a whole bunch of Material UI components. So this will save me a ton of time. So I kind of figured out more boilerplate stuff and added a lorem ipsum snippet generator. Got my icons figured out and fixed a bug with the text box. So we'll run through the final product here. So once again, I updated our manifest to not use our background JS anymore. Right, that's this. We're not writing plain JavaScript anymore. This gets converted from our Rescript version of our service worker now. And now that we upgraded to Rescript version 11, we can add Rescript core, material bindings, and now I'm using Rescript Dexy because I want to add IndexedDB to store our data, and just more boilerplate for upgrading to 11. So yeah, just more light refactoring here, running our service worker build in a separate Vite process, and then just some more dependencies. We can upgrade our Rescript React. We are on version 11. More dependencies. The full service worker boilerplate looks like this. We can, so database make, that creates our database in IndexedDB, this guy. And we load up our schemas, open our database, and then I have categories that I want to put my snippets into. So this one puts a simple lorem ipsum generator snippet in. And then this one has some simple subscribe text, because I don't have an interface yet to let me add these. So I can just do it through code programmatically. And same thing, we load up a map of listeners and add handlers for when our components connect to the runtime. So I have this description snippets. It's a React component, and when you set up a use effect so that when it connects, right, it'll connect by name. So it'll connect by name, and adding a listener so we can get back our data from the database. Right, passing it that payload. We can check what tag it's on, taking the payload, which is our data, and setting that on our model here. Right, so when description snippets connects, we look at the port name, right? If it's description snippets, we add it to our map, and then we load up our table for our description snippets, loading them all up. And then after we load them, we can create a message, right? It's a port message, setting the payload to our description snippets, creating a tag just called init, and then posting that message through the port that our description snippet component is listening for. So back in description, our snippets component is listening for that init tag, taking the payload. Have to do a little data massaging, and then we load our snippets with this message. Right, got snippets, which just loads it on our state, putting it on our model. Don't know why this is here. I think it's just dead code. So we can load them up in our modal and activate them. All right, so to summarize, from our service worker, we can add listeners for our components. So when our component connects, right, on connect, we add a listener for its port. Right, so you have description snippets name, description snippets name, and the name of the snippet component is also the same name as the table for our description snippets. So taking a closer look at our description module, so we know we need this video description selector. Right, that's this box here. And then inside it is this div acting as a text box. So through whatever framework they're using, it looks like it's Polymer. So far we only need two selectors, one for the description container and one for the text box. And so we'll query for those using React Query. We'll have our query result, and if we get our video description element, we can load our component, our view, into that box, and then we'll hold on to our video description text box for later, right, adding it to our model if it's not already been set. So we have a type for our model. You can see we have several maybes on here, which to me is a bit of a code smell, so I'll probably refactor this later, but for now it gets us moving. Right, so here we have this expanded snippet. That's for knowing which one of these is open and closed. Right, this one's expanded, now this one's expanded. And the maybe dialog is this dialog wrapper, whether or not this whole modal window is open. Right, so maybe dialog is a reference to, right, this dialog wrapper, whether or not it is open on the page. Maybe text box is a reference to this text box element on the page itself. And selected snippet is the one we click on to actually activate and add to the text box. Snippets is an array of, as you can see, schema description snippets. So this will be a collection of description snippets, right? So we'll be able to fill out this list here inside our dialog. And so I like to use reducer, as it gets me kind of an Elm-like experience. So adding a model and a message. And I like to put my messages in alphabetical order. So starting from the top, we have close dialog, right? That's the event that happens when, right, we close our dialog. Expanded snippet, right? That will be what happens when we click on this one of these buttons to expand. Got snippets is what happens when we get that list of snippets from the database. Got text box for when we get the text box element. Open dialog for when we click add snippet here to, well, open the dialog. Selecting, as you can imagine, for when we click on one to activate it. And then snippet flushed is so we can clear out that selected snippet. So you'll see why we have that, right? So everything I just described is what happens in update. And so when we make our component, we set our initial state, setting up useReducer with our update function, and we have this initial use effect to wire up the Chrome runtime. So when we get our snippets, there's a little data massaging here because we lose a bit of info. Our schema dictates that date should be a actual date type, but we lose that information when going across the Chrome runtime. It converts it to a string, so this is a little data massaging to get it back to a proper date type so that our formatting and stuff will work as normally because it'll have an actual date type and not a string. So I was getting errors with that, and I thought this was interesting. So we'll use effect on every render, and so we'll make sure we have that maybe text box and a selected snippet. So if we have some text box and some snippet, we'll take the old text, right, the full text content, right, the full text content of the box, and we'll create new text with that, taking the snippet body, right, that's the text in here, adding that to the old text, joining it with the new lines so we get some nice spacing, and then we'll set the new text as the inner text of our text box. And then we have to make this input event dispatching that on our text box. And then we'll call that dispatch, and then we'll dispatch that snippet flushed, right? Meaning that it's been written to the DOM to clear out the snippet from our selected snippet. So you might be wondering why we have to hit this input event. It's so that this undo change picks up on the fact that we changed our input here. All right, so we're kind of tricking Polymer, I guess, into picking up the fact that we input some new text here. And then here we have some view functions. So this activate button is the button we'll use to open our dialog, dispatch, on click, dispatch, open dialog. And so I did load icons from Material UI, and then just a bit of styling. Add snippet, so that when we open our dialog, we'll run view dialog here, wiring up on close to dispatch close dialog, that kind of thing. A little bit of formatting. And then we'll pass state snippets over to view snippets, which will load up our list of snippets. That's this list here. So we'll take our snippets, map over them, creating these boxes with list items in them, so we can add a bit of styling. How do we know when this collapse component is expanded? It's expanded if the state expanded snippet selected is the same as some current snippet. So we use that to switch the direction of our icon button, going from up to down, and whether or not the collapse component is in or out. So clicking on this button dispatches expand snippet, passing it the snippet, and then it determines whether or not to open this one or open this one, close the other one. And then when you select one, clicking this larger button, it selects it. So look at that again, selecting it, Selected snippet is now some snippet that we just selected. So pretty straightforward, pretty happy with how it came out. So our top level view now, that we render in our portal. We have some dialog if some dialog has been selected, view dialog. Otherwise nothing, we'll just render out React null, which is nothing. And we have some dialog that will render and that activate button. So that'll get added to the description box wrapper whenever it gets loaded. So I hope that makes sense. Hit subscribe if you want to see more. In the next video, we will work on adding a snippet editor. I thought about having the editor UI inside this modal as well, but I think I'm going to move it to a separate pop-up window over here. It just felt cluttered putting it all in this modal or this dialog here. So stay tuned for that. Hit like, hit subscribe. We'll see you then.